Like when it says going live, we're already live. That makes sense, right? Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and faithful followers.
Hey, it's the best case scenario podcast. Tell a friend.
Always tell a friend.
Yes.
I'm D Johnson, as always. To the right of me, your left, friend of the people, Robert Kelly.
That's right. Peace.
Today we're going to get right into the good old G7 summit. That is, what is the most recent thing that has happened in the world that's important? So that's what we're going to talk about.
The G7 summit, for those of you that don't know, the G7 summit is a meeting of the minds of the leaders of the top 7 economic powers of the Western world. This year represented by U.S., UK, France, Italy, Canada, and Germany and Japan. So these countries are the premier economic powers of the quote-unquote Western world, and they meet every year. They've been meeting together since the 70s. I think
1975?
75, I want to say, yeah. And this year they met in France.
Biarritz. We've been trying to figure out how to say it for the last 10 minutes. I want to say it's Biarritz, or Biarritz, or Biarritz.
They met in Gay Paris.
Somewhere like that.
I don't know. I think it's the southern. I think that's the southern France, and it's like French Riviera type of deal.
Basically, where you would expect a bunch of rich old capitalists to be hanging out. That's where they was at.
Absolutely. So this year was the 45th meeting of the minds. It was on the 24th of August through the 26th of August, 2019, and a lot of interesting things. It is. There's no real binding resolutions or anything they come to. They don't create laws or anything. It's not like a legislature.
No policies. Yeah, there's no policies that happen there.
Well, it's just basically a discussion on how they're going to cooperate, collaborate, what have you, or not on certain issues, so that people know how to, I guess, set the agenda for. They set the agenda for the year in particular. So.
Water it down for some of those that may not even follow that. It's like when it's when all the members of all the hoods come together. They figure out whether or not they're gonna shoot and stab each other for the rest of the year, how they're gonna do it, what the rules are gonna be about engagement, things of that nature. So, very interesting things. Very interesting things about it are, it used to be the G8. You used to have Russia as a member of the coalition, if you will. They are no longer a part of the coalition since 2014 because they, what would you call that?
Annexed.
I love annex. Me and my friends like to call it repatriation. They annexed Ukraine and Crimea. If that was the term, that was the name they made sure they used when they walked in, because that's what it's originally called when it was still part of Russia.
Well, Crimea is not the entire nation. So Crimea is a peninsula,
yeah,
and it's part of the Ukraine. So they didn't annex the entire Ukraine; they annexed Crimea, so the peninsula, the Crimean Peninsula, and they began to occupy it with troops in 2014, and
haven't left since.
Right, and since then, the other members have basically kept Russia from participating in this summit, which was previously the G8. Well, it was the G7, then the G8, then the G7 again. So Canada had, but after 1 year, the second year is when Canada joined the discussions there, and it became the G8, and then it became the G7 again in 2014.
So very interesting. Interestingly enough, I mean, we beating a dead horse when I feel like I get to talk too much about this, but President Trump, Donald Trump, is actively campaigning for them to be reintroduced to the G8. He's quoted to have said, "It's better to have them in the tent than to have them out of the tent," and I can't disagree with them on it. I mean, we're talking about the economic powers of the West. It's not too many that have been around as long as Russia has. So definitely somebody you want to have openly discussing things with you instead of having to trying to pry behind the iron curtain that is the Kremlin, trying to figure out what's going on. So
absolutely.
But as I always have said, and I will always say, it's very. I don't understand the reasoning behind it. I don't understand the reasoning why it has to be Donald Trump that has to, toot the horn, because I mean it's already bad enough what's going on home soil. But I mean, hey, whatever it takes to get the right people at the table, I guess. Outside of that, I was really kind of surprised to see how much effort that President France put into this. He put a lot of effort into trying to get the right people in the right places. I mean, he brought in one of the ministers from Iran. You said who did he bring in from India?
Modi from India.
Okay.
So Modi, the right wing politician / leader, president of India, right now tied up in a very precarious struggle with Pakistan over the fate of Kashmir. So it was important, I guess, that he also show his face there. But the overall lying theme over the entire G7 summit was basically this fascist, this gathering of the fascist powers that be. So mostly, India is controlled by a fascist in Modi. United States is controlled by Donald Trump as a fascist. Johnson is a fascist in the UK. And then Italy and Germany are also controlled by fascists to a certain extent. Germany to a lesser extent. Canada certainly a little more progressive.
A lot more progressive. Canada's of all of the, I would imagine of all of the seven, Canada's probably the most progressive one. I know America'd like to say that, but I mean they have all of the progressive things that America's arguing about in 2020, and some of those things have been in place for a long time in Canada. So,
yeah. So, without any further ado, we'll just talk a little bit about the some of the outcomes from the G7 as opposed. Normally, at the end of the 3-day summit, they'll sign a communique. It's non-binding, but it's something that they will sign in order to make sure that they're to make sure they're on the same page, like as far as what came out of it. Last year's communique, there was no signing, but everyone signed it except for Donald Trump. The reason Donald Trump did not sign the communique is because of the commitment to climate change. He had just recently gotten out of the Paris Climate Accord. The G7 in Canada, which was held in Quebec, was actually a lot of it was surrounding climate change, and Donald Trump did refuse to agree with the communique. He actually left early as well,
which
from there,
falls right in line with this year, when the conversation turned towards the Amazon. He didn't show up for that.
Right, and Macron said it was because there were bilateral talks, meaning that there was another talk that he was in at that time. But I think it's convenient when you're talking about the major existential threat facing the Earth at this point in time, to conveniently have better things to do, quote unquote.
But it's the same story every time. I mean, even on domestic soil, you can't tie that man down to a conversation about climate change, because it's going to tell you it's just false science. There's no support for it. There's nothing that really at the end of the day, we all know what that all simply means is there's money that can go to the military that we don't need to worry about putting towards some more trees. So convenient, yes. Patternistic, most definitely. A lot of the media is saying, but we shouldn't be surprised by this, and I don't think a lot of people are at this point. But I guess my point on that, but not rattle, is that even with all of these countries coming together, there was only $20 million raised for the rainforest in efforts to stop the fires.
Yeah, there was also a military commitment given by France to the Amazon. So, yes. In order to stop that,
shout out Macron.
Not only that, to protect the indigenous people who are losing their land out there because of these intentionally set fires. Yeah. So if I'm, say, a rancher or a miner, and I want to take over that land or use that land and the resources of that land,
Gotta
I
burn it
may
out from under
I may start
somebody.
a fire around your village. But
If your village gets burnt up, it's a
but-
natural occurrence. You can't blame me for
and
it.
and all this week you've seen backlash for people just of their villages being burned down. You've actually seen footage of villages actually being burned to the ground, and impassioned pleas from from villagers, from indigenous people of Brazil, pleading with the media, pleading with the governments of the world to step in to do something, because uh, since Bolsonaro has come to power, the Amazon has been a commodity to be bought and sold. And first, when in previous times past, it's been regarded as a public commons. So um, it's the terrible twist of fate, considering everything that's going on with the climate. Um, they're actually, due to some of the things that they're allowing to happen, speeding up the inevitable, which is the climate change and the effects thereof, and allowing us less time to get prepared as a human, as a species.
Yeah.
And you got to put it in anthropological biological terms, because it's that serious, where humans could very well find themselves either decimated in numbers or even virtually extinct in the next 100, 200 years.
I think it's a lot sooner than that. I think the numbers are somewhere around 2050, 2060, where it could literally be where we're, I don't know, I don't want to say that, but we're cannibalizing ourselves as a society. Because at some point we're gonna have to figure out how to survive with less. But again, that's something that we've heard throughout most of the Democratic national debates lately. But I mean, like you said, it's like for the people would say, it's not about politics. It's not even about that anymore. It's about survival. So that was one of the things. I know you may have saw the subject line where we said achievements and failures. I think that was a huge loss on a global level for them to not come to some kind of accord on how to figure out how to accept the facts that we do live in a time where climate change is not just it's not just one of those we need to worry about it things. It's on our front door now.
Right. And so concerning climate change, while it may not have been a concern to the leaders on the inside of that hotel where it was held in Biarritz, it was definitely the one of the main topics on the outside among the people. So I'm looking at a Reuters article here where there was the French police fired tear gas and water cannons at anti-G7 protesters. So in Bayonne, France, there was an anti-capitalist G7 protest, which wanted to bring focus to wealth inequality and climate change. And so the French police used water cannons and tear gas to disperse anti-capitalism protesters in Bayonne, near the resort in Biarritz, where President Emmanuel Macron and the G7 national allies were meeting for a 3-day summit, according to John Irish.
Now, understand, they didn't do anything violent. Most people would say, oh, well, they were probably out causing the disturbance. They probably was out causing the ruckus. A couple of people threw some rocks, so, I mean, you're probably going to get hit with some water and you deserve it. But for the most part, they were largely peaceful. And, I mean, they blocked a couple of roads. So if anything tells you that capitalism does and is a problem, that's the kind of thing, because they're clearing the road so commerce can go through. It wasn't because they were clearing the road because they were mad at people for making somebody's commute a little longer. You got to keep those lines of trade going. You got to get them out of the streets. And it's not even about human rights. It's just more or less the world knows. The world is starting to see it for what it is. Capitalism, while touted as a great system, just doesn't work for the populace anymore. It's it's separatist.
Right.
It's very separatist. It always has been. It always will be. If you're not on the top side of capitalism, then you're on the bottom side. And if you're on the bottom side, it's just like any other. It's like the bottom of any other shoe.
Well, if you watched the Meme Knowledge podcast that we had on Thursday night, you would have heard us. We showed something called a Great Gatsby graph, and a Great Gatsby graph shows income inequality and upward mobility on a graph. And if you were reading that graph, you would know that the United States, France, they're some of the worst countries when you're talking in terms of income disparity, and you're talking about upward mobility. So there's been protests for the last I think what was about a year and a half in France.
Yellow Vest movement.
Right. So a lot of these Yellow Vest protesters were also here. They're basically anti-globalization activists.
Anti-capitalist.
Right.
And all they really want, and I mean, at the end of the day, because I've been watching them do this for, like you said, about a year. They only want what's fair. And everybody says that life isn't fair, and that's it's a running statement, and it's very true. Life is not very fair, but at a certain point, if you're not getting treated fairly, you're gonna start stepping up and fighting for your rights, and that's what the French are doing. That's what they've been doing. I think it's gone over to a couple of other countries now. I think Spain has something going like that as well. But the point is, they're only asking for the same things that over 60 to 70% of the population is asking for anyway. Fair economic model, a real and honest conversation, and solutions to climate change. Mm-hmm. It's not something. I mean, it's not very much to ask. Well, I guess I have to say about that.
Well, absolutely, and basically, it's a representation of some of the far-reaching policy. When you're talking about fascism economically has been attached to an economic position or policy of austerity.
Yes.
And austerity is about cutting taxes for rich people, and about cutting programs and cutting the social safety net, even as you raise taxes to cut the social safety net in order to pay back debt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been proven not to work. But they've done nothing. It does nothing but place an undue burden on the people. For instance, if you owe $1 trillion in debt, what's raising the taxes to generate another $1 billion going to do? And then if you cut programs to generate another $1 billion, you're basically raising $2 billion to solve a $1 trillion problem.
It's a futile exercise, and I think that's why the people are getting much more vocal about it, because it's not rocket science to see that it isn't.
Right.
I mean, they try to put these models together, and I mean, for the longest time, it was, well, you don't understand. And that was always been the thing that your government will tell you is, we're doing this for the best, we're doing this for your better interest. You just don't understand. But now that the politicians are starting to become the people that were benefiting from these tax breaks, it's not rocket science. They're keeping them in power to keep them doing the same things, keep the same things moving forward. You got to keep the machine going, I should say.
Right.
But definitely glad to see that people did come out and make their voices heard, because if the people don't fight, like we always say, I know a friend of the people says it all the time. I know I say it all the time in my regular life and on this podcast. If you don't say something, they're not going to listen.
Right.
They're not going to pay attention to you. They're not going to pay attention to you complaining about it. They need action. Like Jay-Z said it best, even though I don't agree with all the stuff that he did, but he said it best. I mean, the time for kneeling is past. It's time for actionable items. We got to start making them understand that, we're not going to live in a capitalist society anymore. We're not going to live with finite resources or not finite resources, but things that benefit the humanity on a whole being taken away from our not even our power or control, but from our benefit. The Amazon is just something everybody benefits from. It's 20% of the world's lungs. That's just a crazy way to even think that you would not have, or you would not go out and protest. Somebody needs to say something. If you got a Twitter, I would imagine you need to at somebody and say something. But my point is, good move on the part of the Yellow Vest movement to still keep it going. Right. Prime example of don't stop till you get the change you're looking for. Too many things start and they stop. So I commend them for that.
Right. Top capitalist leaders are here, and we have to show them that the fight continues. That's a quote from Elaine Masana, an electrician that was at the protest wearing yellow vest. A symbol of the anti-government demonstrations that have been held in France for 6 months. We basically, what we've got going on right here is, people are beginning to become a little bit more savvy as to what the government's coming out. I think as we go into the information age and go deeper into the information age, it's not the same tactics that were formerly used by the government are no longer going to work the same effectiveness. And I believe that due to that, you're going to see more people, stand up. We aren't. The fact of the matter is that when you're looking at what's going on in America economically, you have to contextualize that in terms of what's going on overseas as well. Yes. And oftentimes we like to think that, because we're having a problem in America, it might not be the same thing going on in other parts of the world. Well, this movement of fascism, this resurgence of fascism over the past couple of decades has caused a great deal of separation between rich and poor. The gap continues to rise, and it's not just something that's going on in America. And so we're going to have to fight this on a war on many fronts in order to make sure that fascism
can't be just a local
doesn't prevail. Right. Mm-hmm. So we have to make sure that fascism doesn't prevail. How do we do that? First is by recognizing what's going on, to recognize who the enemy is. Because in a lot of ways, the media represents the enemy as the friend, and the enemy right now is globalization. Yeah. So, and because of the global commitment to capitalism and this global commitment to fascism, we basically will put ourselves in a position where, on a worldwide scale, where the working class, the poor, and even the middle class are in dire straits financially. And we're not seeing, even though the large corporations are seeing record growth, record profits, our people, the people, the regular people, the average Joe is not seeing that same economic benefit. Right, exactly. So because of that, but when you see these leaders go out to talk about the economy on a world scale, they're always bringing up performance indicators that
show that
benefit the rich.
People are working, right. And I mean, not even just to benefit the rich, but to show that, okay, well, we're not. The opportunity is there, because capitalism has always been built on the idea of opportunity. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity is there. You can go to work. You can work your way up, and that's not going to work. Absolutely not. I love that they sell that, and it goes all the way back to education. Where it's not so much about learning; it's about being obedient, knowing how to stick to a schedule. Mm-hmm. We know that that's what they're teaching our kids these days. They're not teaching our kids reading, writing, and arithmetic like they even focused on in the 60s and 70s. So the rhetoric that's fed from corporations down to the people, the masses that be, is that the chance is there, the opportunity is there, but we see that that's not true. It's almost double speed, because corporations are taking more things away from people. They're taking away more of your health care. They're taking away your stock options, your pensions. They're taking those things. They're scaling those programs back, like he said. And the next thing you know, you're getting taxed for more things. So the people that benefit from the taxes are the rich.
And it's almost like there's something. It's what you would expect from a corporation, right? I mean, to do what they can to protect their bottom line. After all, that is what they're doing this for, yeah. Right? But when you're talking about the government, the government is in cahoots with large corporations And the government is actually protecting their bottom line, which is not the government's job. The government's job is to promote the general welfare of the people. And so the government has gotten out of the business, so to speak, of protecting the people from corporations, and they've gone to right. They've gone to a business model, I would say, right, because it is mutually beneficial financially for both of them. A business model where they're now protecting the profits of these corporations that are in turn funding their the politicians, the campaign.
And
right.
And we all know that you can go and look up public. You can look, it's public record. You can look up what they get in their campaign contributions from. But whether or not we know that, if there's no action behind it, then they don't care what you see. Yeah. That's why it's hiding in plain sight. They're not worried about what you can see. They're not even worried about what you can prove because nobody's going to do anything about it. And again, that'll bring it full circle back to us always saying the same thing, which is, hey, 2020 is coming. Get your ass up out and vote.
Right. And that's why there's great effort taken in the world in terms of media to discredit politicians, people that stand up for working class citizens, that stand up for unionization, people that stand up for just basic
economic
decency.
equality.
Yeah,
anybody that stands up for anybody that you've ever watched as a politician, and you probably don't remember them because they typically make sure you don't hear about them. But anybody that you'll ever hear that talks about economic equality is probably going to be the person that gets the least amount of press.
Right. So when you're talking about in terms of, and that's on a domestic level, it's also, especially on a domestic level here in the United States, because there's tremendous amount of money to be made. So by protecting their bottom line. So what can we do? When they're even going further, when you're talking about other nations as well, when you're talking about the jailing of Lula da Silva, who has been in jail for nearly 540 days.
So we're almost pushing up on
530, 540 days. Right, he's in his second year of being locked up on trumped up charges.
Political prisoner, because guess what he was trying to do? Help the people.
It's not even tried. It's what he
was doing.
He lifted 85% of Brazilians out of poverty, one of the most impoverished countries ever, with some of the worst economic disparity. He did much to close the gap.
And they don't have much of a product to sell to the world. Other than their rainforest, and he avoided selling the rainforest in order for them to come out of poverty.
Well, it's like Brazil is like a lot of other places. They have a lot of natural resources. Brazil is not, as a nation, is not hurt. They have a very high GDP. There's a lot of, it's the same thing though, but the wealth is accumulated at the top, and it's always been that way. And because it's been that way, a lot of times you got to understand that it turns from economics to a social issue. For instance, would you care if, say they have a small group of white people there, and they have a large class of Indian and black people in Brazil? That's the makeup of Brazil. Now, the white minority is very, very rich. Okay, now when they remained rich, they benefited a lot off of Lula's policy too. Lula actually left office with an 85% approval rating, which is the highest of any politician pretty much ever. He's actually the most popular politician in the world today. So then and he's in prison, which is weird. So when you lift that lower class, that makes real good sense. So now you lift that lower class up, and you close the gap a little bit. Yeah. Now there are people that can afford to do things that they couldn't normally do before. So now with things that me and my white friends would normally go to and only see white people, like the airport. Right. Now I'm seeing these black people and these Indians here, and I don't want them there. I don't want them living to the same extent. I don't want to have to get in line with them. I don't want to have to lose a ticket to them. I don't want to have, you know what I mean? So now an economic issue where like, wait a minute, I'm doing well economically, but wait, so are they? Now it becomes a social issue.
Yeah.
Because
there's no divider.
The people, there's no one that fears change like a rich person. There's no one that fears change like a rich person. There's no one that fears more rich people like a capitalist. There's
not enough at the top for you when you already have a lot.
Right. Because the thing about it is that when they fear competition. So when you fear competition, it means anybody that's coming up can be considered your competition. And when you're doing that, then you start to get scared when the world starts changing around you. And that's the thing about capitalism. They always say it's about, it's about inviting competition, it's about inviting opportunity. But basically, actually, capitalism has done much to stifle competition because it rewards being snide, it rewards being racist, it rewards being, creating social classes and castes. Yeah. It rewards greed, it rewards corruption, it rewards those things. And there will be people of the school that say, oh, well, people are greedy by nature. It says, well, but that doesn't mean that we should have a system in place that actually rewards it.
Right.
People will people go where the rewards are at. For instance, you know what I mean? For instance, you go into, experiment and somebody pushes a button, they get a reward. They're going to push that button and get the reward.
I mean, that's all.
If you tell them to push a different button for the reward, they'll start pushing a different button for the reward.
As long as you get as long as the reward keeps coming.
As long as the reward keeps coming, as long as it's something that you're desired. But now if we go to an economic system where the reward isn't from greed isn't rewarded. We go to an economic system where innovation and change and things of that nature are actually rewarded. The more people that you help with it is going to be rewarded, not how much you can sell. Because there's a difference between selling something to somebody and helping someone. Those are two different things. But in capitalism, they get a misconstrued like it's the same thing.
Like what's very interesting is they'll always call it they don't call it a warehouse anymore. They call it a fulfillment center because you got to paint the picture that you're fulfilling a need
or that you're fulfilling an order.
That's the way I see it. But they would say, oh, no, we're fulfilling the needs of the masses. People need this stuff. Nobody needs this stuff. Anyway,
they ask for it.
They like it.
Yeah, that's
it makes life easier, but you don't need it.
And that's super fine. But what I'm saying is that people should get paid people should get paid right for their hard work.
People should get paid an equitable wage for hard work. That's kind of, when you talk about housing and socioeconomics, those are two of the things that don't make any sense in any state or country that I've seen so far. There's no reason that the housing market shouldn't be relative to the amount of money to the employment market. You should be able to get a job and be able to afford to live somewhere. But again, that's the rich getting rich. Housing market it's just part of the same 1% that's at the top anyway.
Yeah, and to the credit, look, there's nothing wrong with being rich. It's something wrong with being rich in the same nation where someone else has nothing. See, if everyone had their basic needs taken care of, but there were rich people, those rich people can be rich.
Well, I've always said,
but if people don't have, as long as there are other people that do not have their basic needs taken care of, how is it right that there's someone that is rich?
Well, like I've always said, you can be rich. Just pay your fair share. I mean, if I got to pay 10% on $100, you should have to pay 10% on $100 million. It shouldn't be lower taxes because you made more money.
Right.
That just doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm not saying you should get taxed more. I'm just saying if I got to pay 25, 35%, you should have to pay 25 or 35%. Equality comes in the fact that it's equal. We may not have the same standings as equal. We may not be equal on the same standings, but the way that we take care of our day-to-day affairs within our government should be the same. Okay. One of the other things that I found that was very interesting that they finally spoke about was making sure that Iran had no more nuclear weapons. That's something that all of the G7 agreed upon.
Definitely, and I could agree on that too.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with them not having nuclear weapons.
Why does anybody have nuclear weapons, if you ask me?
That's going to be the question. I was just about to say that. So, but at the same token, I could see Iran saying the same thing about Russia and the United States, which is, hey, you guys got it. Why can't we have it?
Well, the reason being is that they painted a picture in the Middle East that basically they're that Iran's dangerous, and that
You don't think they are?
I think not any more dangerous than any other nation. Nations are dangerous. Nations are dangerous. Yeah. That is, to me, that's life.
Person is dangerous.
America is dangerous.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. And they got a lot of buttons they can push, but
America's a dangerous nation.
Yeah, I can see Iran really asking the question of whether or not it's fair, but
overall, it comes down to the United States wants to be in a position to control oil trade.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, and if there are other homogenies rising up, other superpower, any kind of power that could possibly rise up in the Middle East, that would definitely jeopardize their mission to control the oil. Now, also, of course, in America, there's this unbelievable infatuation with Israel that we have as well.
And love to get to that.
With Israel and in I guess Israel and Iran being enemies, you're gonna want to protect your ally by preventing, because if let's keep it real, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, they're probably getting a nuclear weapon to drop it on Israel if they're gonna use it.
I can't think of anybody who's going. I was going to say I don't think anybody else is further up on the get bombed out of your existence list for Iran than Israel is.
But get this, Israel has nuclear weapons.
They do.
So
and I can firmly tell you that I doubt the United States would ever say the same thing, or anybody at the G7 would say the same thing about Israel having nuclear weapons.
Well, Israel is they're savvy on this. Israel is refused or didn't have to or did not sign the nuclear non-proliferation treaty that most countries, just about every country that has nuclear weapons, except for Israel, is in. So they're not down with nuclear non-proliferation.
Yeah, limitations on
right. So they are still able to, to whatever extent they're allowed at this point, to proliferate nuclear weapons if they want to.
Well, I guess, if you wanted to, armchair reasoning for me would be that they're the only non-Palestinian country in a land full of Palestinian countries. They do not apply pressure to Palestinians. They do not cause problems for Palestinians. Gaza Strip, as we know of it right now, is being razed to the ground. So I could see them not being too fond of having anybody tell them that they can't have nuclear weapons, because you got to have a stick to keep the monsters at bay.
Well, they don't need all that, because they don't nuke. The Palestinians in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank, they don't have nuclear weapons. They don't even have regular weapons. They
got friends and family in high places.
No, they don't. Because there's a difference between just being in Arab nations, and being a Palestinian. Palestinian is a very small ethnic group of people. There's only about 1 million of them. Yeah. And, they don't have anything like a nuclear weapon. They don't have any ICBMs. They don't have any tanks. They don't have any of that stuff. And they're living in a state of apartheid. I was watching a Democracy Now! Interview with a woman that basically, it was a man. He came from, from the United States, and he went to Palestine. He comes back and he says it was something similar to, if you could imagine Jim Crow, the United States, the Jim Crow South going on there right now.
Mm.
So they're living in terrible conditions. It's an open air prison. They can't go back and forth with freedom, where they live, and they can't, and it's a serious state of apartheid, much like what was going on in South Africa. Right.
But here's what I'm saying, but in a country like that where people, I won't say they have I'm not saying Iran it's like we're backing Palestinian suffering. We're going to take it to but there's probably more people that would use that as an excuse, is what I'm saying, especially because the Israeli nation is not recognized by the Palestinian nation as a real nation. But
because they were all there before they were there.
Yeah, Israel came into being in 1948.
Yeah.
So you can imagine they really don't. They don't see a reason they need to respect them because they're not centuries old. Well, they are.
But they do respect them.
But they do respect them because that they have that military might. That they can push that button. So that's all I'm saying is, even if they could dog the Palestinians out and not have nobody really come at their front door because everybody knows they with the business. You know what I mean? They ready for all the smoke you could bring and possibly even a little bit more because they have very, very powerful allies.
And right now there's rumors that that Israel is in secret talks with the UAE, the Arab Emirates, in plot to coerce Iran to war. So
that's not surprising.
So stay tuned for that.
Them not being a part of the G7, it truly doesn't surprise me, just because Israel has always been they're very, very, what's the right term I want to use without sounding sneaky? they do a lot of things. They'll shake your hand with this hand. It could possibly be knifing you in the gut with the other. You got to watch Israel.
That's almost anti-Semitic.
I'm saying as a country. I'm not talking about at the government level. I'm not talking about the people.
Well, they are white right-wing authoritarian government, and they are
But they look very I guess they tend to not get the my favorite term is black eye, but they tend to not get a lot of the black eyes for the things that they do, almost as if they're being antagonized into it, if that makes sense. Like if there's a bombing that happens in Israel, you know what I mean? They immediately take to the Palestine nations or the Palestine community, and they go in hand. They go hard.
But that's the thing. That's not what happens. It's not even that. They throw rocks. You throw rocks. They throw missiles.
Yeah, no. That's what I'm saying. Think about it. If I'm just trying to think of a prime example, North Korea starts shelling South Korea. People are going to be in an uproar. Like, why would you do that? That's not right. Don't like we're going back to war. You don't get that same response if you see if somebody comes from the Gaza Strip and blows up a nightclub. I remember a story a while back that somebody came into Israel, blew up a nightclub. For the next 3 to 4 weeks, Israel was just methodically pounding the shit out of the Gaza Strip. You know what I mean? And nobody across the globe, not the UN, no one condemns them for it because it's sort of like, well, they had it coming. They should know their place. So, it's like you can almost say that a lot of the government sympathize with Israel to say, hey, well, you know what? These guys just don't know how to stop doing violent shit. So you have to defend yourself.
Well, did they bomb Texas when there was a mass shooting in El Paso?
Who?
Did they bomb Dallas when the El Paso shooter?
Who? The Mexicans?
No, when he was
Mexican people don't do bombs. They don't.
Those weren't Mexican people. Those were Americans of Mexican descent in America.
Did America
bomb Dallas? Did America bomb Dallas?
No.
When the El Paso shooter. Okay, so there you have it. It's no justification for what they're doing.
Oh no, there is none. No. That's what I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's just I think in a lot of senses, and I think they hide behind the fact that because of what's happened to Jewish people over the last couple of centuries, you will, that they have a right to be very defensive. They have
you would think that I think the other way around. I think that based on what's happened to Jewish people in when we're talking about the Holocaust, or we're talking about the just general attitudes towards the Jewish people, you would think that they would be a lot less oppressive to another group of people, to a small group of people like the Palestinians.
Which almost brings me to another point, which is to say this is why the rich are afraid of the poor, becoming not even so much rich, just not poor. You know what I mean? Like, could they be like us? Could they immediately, with a little bit of money, turn into us? So, and that's a very interesting socioeconomic conversation we might have at a later time. But that's just something to think about, like, because as soon as Israel did get their own nation, they became badasses. They became the Billy Badass on their side of the planet. They took it to the Palestinians hard body. They stopped since, and no one said anything about it. But people know that it's not right. Like you said, it's not right. But I do agree wholeheartedly with all of the G7 though, saying Iran don't need nuclear weapons. My opinion on Iran is just they're very antagonistic towards the rest of the world because they know that they can actually do shit like that.
And my opinion is the less nukes, the better.
So, overall.
But we need to work on the Western world getting rid of their nuclear weapons.
Their stockpile, because I don't think they make any more new ones. I think Obama signed that treaty that we weren't going to make any new nuclear weapons.
Well, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act says that basically the there's two groups of nations. There's nations that have nuclear weapons, and there's ones that don't, that are members. Now, the ones that are members that have nuclear weapons, they all have promised not to use their nuclear weapons, number one. They've all promised not to make any new nuclear weapons, and they promised not to help other nations develop nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Now, on the but what they have promised to do is to help other nations develop nuclear energy programs if they desire. And so thus Iran. Iran, that's why Iran, in the deal that they made with America, was according to that treaty, where if they stopped enriching uranium for weapons purposes, weapons grade, that they would help to develop their nuclear energy program.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what they were doing until Donald Trump decided that the deal wasn't good enough and that it needed to be renegotiated.
Say that man's name less every day.
And that's where we sit every day today. So let's talk about economics. Let's talk about China.
Okay.
And so basically another thing that came out of the G7 is the agreement of China and the United States to go back to the bargaining table on the tariffs and the trade war.
Good move, man. Good move, because at the end of the day, the tariffs don't hurt anything but business. It doesn't hurt anything but trade. It doesn't, and there's no victory when people start losing jobs and people start losing, or businesses start losing it. Small businesses, if you will, start losing revenue. Matter of fact, Donald Trump, before the G7 started, he was sent a letter by about 200 different companies saying that the tariffs are in turn becoming job killers, which me and a friend of the people talked about that before. He opines that that's kind of going to be the excuse, and I agree, because you can imagine even if the tariffs even if things are coming out positively on the tariff side, you may see still cut jobs just because of of the damage that was already done before they got to that agreement table.
Mm-hmm. Personally, I think that I think that the economic indicators of recession have have changed Trump's position to a certain extent on the tariffs. I think that he's just trying to save face economically now. He does say that things like China is weakening because of the tariffs, which is true. The tariffs will hurt both sides. The trade war will hurt both sides for sure.
Yeah,
but when China is your number one trading partner, if they go into a recession, you're going to go into a recession. So both nations will be hurt big time. But the difference is they're trying to wait it out. Like, who can wait it out the longest? The president in China is president for life.
Yeah.
Trump can't. A recession will.
Xi Jinping?
Yeah.
Xi Jinping is not going anywhere. If anyone can wait it out, he can wait it out.
So, but a recession will basically spell the end of the Trump presidency going into 2020.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, if we're going to talk about mixing world politics with American politics, Trump's riding. He's on a tightrope right now. So it's a precarious position. He's like in the middle of the top rope or middle of the tightrope. You see the guy. He's a little off balance. He's on that one leg and he's trying to catch that balance.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of where he's at right now because you got to appease your base, but you also got to think now things are more on a, like you said, the information age. It's more about global. It's more about what. It's easier to have your ideals shared across the world than it used to be.
Right.
Not all of your policies are going to sit at home, and a lot of these countries, especially a lot of these foreign leaders in countries that are starting to develop, that are starting to come into more and more power, they're really going to look at people that are making it harder for those kind of developments to happen. Trump's that guy. Trump doesn't really want to position himself that way, especially moving into 2020. So I don't know if necessarily China's position is even weakening as much as he's saying, as much as it's his. So like I said, very interesting that was immediately what was come up. He actually Trump himself said that he spoke to China at length about it. So it was something that they were going to, I guess, maybe he wanted to get in front of the story and say it was, again, the Trump move. You know how he likes to do it, get ahead of the news and say, I'm the one that was responsible for this. But, yeah, at least at this point, we know that both sides understand the importance of keeping this economic growth that we've got so far going forward.
Absolutely. So, so do you think, there's a recession on the horizon, or?
As with every ebb, as with every flow, so shall there be an ebb. We've had about 10 years. What is it? 2008, about 12 years of economic growth, but a lot of it again isn't sustainable growth. I think like we always talk about how corporations have gone out and they've increased the revenue coming in, but even put it this way, Apple knew in 2016 there was not going to be any more. They had already reached the ceiling for the iPhone 7 or for the iPhone. They already knew it. They knew that there was only one or two ways that they could continue to make a profit on an iPhone. One was to increase the price, or simply sell them or sell more of them, and that wasn't going to happen. So that's why the price of an iPhone is increased without them having any new specs on it, any new cameras on it, anything like that. So when you have that kind of a graph that you can see on, or you have that kind of charting for the future, hell yeah, there's a recession on the rise because you can't get away. Like you said, people are savvy. We're not stupid. If we can see what's coming out on the phone, we can see what's coming out in other businesses, and we can also see what's coming out in the way of growth for us to spend more money anyway. I mean, the inflation, money is less valuable today, but they're still asking for more of it, if that makes sense. It's less valuable, but they want to charge you more for things, and it equates to rollback in economy almost every time.
Yeah.
So again, if anybody out there is listening, capitalism, guys. I don't even know. Let me ask you a return question. How many recessions do people need to have before we realize that?
Well, the thing is that what follows a recession is always a massive cover-up to try to mitigate the social damage, the social hit that capitalism takes on it, and a repression of the voices of people that say things contrary. So
those, I told you this was going to happen, guys.
So what happened? So we get a recession in the 30s, for instance, right? Go through a recession in the 30s, and the Depression starts in 1929. Goes through it in the 30s. The war starts. After the war was over, though, economically, there were people that were opposed to capitalism because of what happened in 1929.
Because of the waves.
But there was the best thing that happened for the capitalists was the emergence from World War II of the USSR the way it did, because it put socialism and capitalism, at odds with each other, and it was actually attached. being a socialist or being a communist economically was actually attached to the Red Scare of, are you actually, someone
Are you part of the
that wants to
Cold War
hurt
on the wrong
America,
side?
right? So basically, that's always what happens, and you see now with what happened in 2008. There's a lot of people now that are still the voices of democratic socialism that are, that are looming large in politics. But what they're doing right now is they're actually trying to demonize social democracy.
Well, yeah, like I always tell you, we were talking about this the other day. Our country suffers from a very, very, very large infection of phogyism. We're victims of the same old, if you will. Our country has no change. That's why when you hear people like AOC, Senator Tlaib, even the Tulsi Gabbard that are, or Bernie Sanders that are calling for change, it's so hard because our country has been run by the same old people for 30 or 40 years. You got Joe Biden who's running for president, but he's been in Senate for 20, 30 years. I mean, we're still going, even when we make our voices heard, they're still going to the same ears, and there's no change happening. So that's why there'll always be recessions because, again, like you said, it's a cycle. It's just like when you burn. It's like when the forest burns in the savannah. It's going to burn all the way, all the grasslands, I should say. It's going to burn all the way out. Everybody knows that everything's going to scatter for the hills, but shit gets redistributed. It's going to regrow. People come back, or the animals come back. That's the same thing with our recessionary process here in America. If you get rid of the businesses that were failing, you have an excuse to do that now. You can liquidate a lot of things with the recession. You can put a lot of things into play during a recession. I mean, 2008, we got to see a lot of the trade agreements that, are put into play now. We see a lot of the trade. I shouldn't even say trade, but we see a lot of the there was a marked increase in loan debt, student loan debt, which is great for the country, which is great for creditors because when you have people that owe you money, you can bank on compound interest. You know what I mean? They know how to keep the cycle of debt going, and a recession is known for making sure that you increase that cycle of debt, and they bail out who they feel appropriately needs to be bailed out. 2008, who was bailed out? Banks in the auto industry. Immediately. $798 billion was given to the banks. Like they didn't need that kind of money, but because you can't have those kind of businesses fail for people to have jobs, for them to create debt on, or for them to be able to have a place for those loans to get metered out. That's why they stay. So yes, recession I see on the rise. One of the things I hope happens before that, though, that could kind of stave that off, is that they do, like I said, with the GA, what they're working with the revision of the international taxes. Maybe they'll work somehow on taxing some of the corporations a little bit. I think that's always been my battle cry, but I don't think it'll happen. But that's
taxing some of the businesses.
Tax some of the corporations. I mean, there has to be a threshold. I mean, some of these businesses that we have that are domestic product are billion-dollar businesses at this point. Apple's $1 billion business. I don't see how they don't have not any responsibility because capitalism says you have none. But there should be. That's why I think socialism is something we definitely need to look into at this time because socially speaking, if somebody's making $1 billion and they live in the same yard as somebody that makes 10, they should share. Or just pay their fair share. Because that person that's making $10 may buy one of your products, right? So if they have to pay tax on the product that they bought from you, you should pay tax on the money that they gave you back. But, that has always been my battle cry. Tax the corporations.
Okay, well, so, if you guys want to find out more about the G7, just go ahead and look in it. It's everywhere. MSNBC has reported on it, CNN, Fox News, Time Magazine. Also, a lot of the independent media, such as Gray Zone, also. So, you my baby. Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up because this baby's time. He wants to take a nap.
The children are our future. But there was one last thing you want to touch on. You didn't even tell them about the OSED.
Yeah, well, it's cool.
All right. But I thank y'all for tuning in to us like always.
Yep. So, subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, and you're gonna get the best case scenario podcast, also meme knowledge, and you're going to also be able to get Tyrone's show on KHSX 101.5 every morning in Houston. So shout out to them, and look out for the app, the Stop Babies from Crying app.
If they had one of those, I'll be all that with the thumb, like. Da-da-da-da-da. But yeah, man, big things coming out of the camp. So stay tuned, man. And as always, the best is still yet to come. So, thank y'all. Have a great day.